Commander Vextherin of the Kaldreth Imperium had seen a lot of things in his 342 cycles of military service. He had witnessed the molecular dissolution of entire planets, watched solar systems collapse into themselves, and once personally executed a rebel leader by throwing him into a star. But never, in all those years, had he encountered anything quite as pathetically amusing as the humans. They call it pain tolerance? Vextherin chittered, his mandibles clicking together in what passed for laughter among his species. The sound echoed through the detention hold of the Imperial cruiser Dominance, a massive vessel that could house 12,000 crew members and carried enough firepower to glass a continent. How delightfully primitive. Standing beside him, Lieutenant Coraval, his second-in-command, adjusted her sensory appendages nervously. She was young for her rank, barely 70 cycles old, and still carried that annoying trait of questioning orders. Commander, the human captive has been subjected to neural agony for 6 standard hours. Perhaps we should. Should what? Vextherin interrupted, his 4 eyes narrowing to slits. Show mercy? Compassion? These humans invaded Kaldreth space, Lieutenant. They destroyed 3 of our mining colonies, killed 17,000 of our people, and for what? Because we happened to be extracting resources from a planet they claimed was in their territory. He turned back to the observation window, gazing down at the human strapped to the interrogation platform below. The specimen was male, muscular by their species standards, with dark skin now slick with sweat. Electrodes covered his body, pumping carefully calibrated doses of synthetic agony directly into his nervous system. Every few seconds, his body would convulse, muscles seizing as the torture program cycled through its routines. The fascinating part, Vextherin continued, his voice dripping with mock academic interest, is that they actually evolved to feel more pain than most sentient species. Their nerve density is absurd. It's like they went out of their way to make suffering more efficient. Coraval said nothing, but her chromatic scales shifted to a pale blue, the Kaldreth equivalent of discomfort. Increase the intensity by 20%. Vextherin ordered into the comm system. Below, the human's screams intensified. They were raw, animalistic sounds that would have made most species' skin crawl. Vextherin found them hilarious. Stop. The word was quiet, almost conversational, but it came from neither Vextherin nor Coraval. Both officers spun toward the source, mandibles flaring in surprise. She stood in the doorway of the observation deck, somehow having bypassed 3 security checkpoints, 2 armed guard posts, and a biometric lock system that should have been impenetrable. She was young, maybe 20, standard years if Vextherin's knowledge of human aging was accurate. Blonde hair pulled back in a simple tail, wearing nothing but what appeared to be standard prisoner clothing, a gray jumpsuit 2 sizes too large. Her eyes were green, the color of Earth's oceans in the files he'd studied. And she was smiling. Not a pleasant smile, not warm or inviting. It was the smile of someone who just heard a particularly funny joke and was waiting for everyone else to catch up to the punchline. Who in the 7 hells are you? Vextherin demanded, reaching for his plasma sidearm. Me? The girl tilted her head, still smiling. I'm nobody important, just another prisoner. Name's Dakota Mills, but you can call me Coda. Most people do right before things get complicated. Security! Coraval shouted into her wrist communicator. Intruder on detention observation deck 3. Oh, they can't hear you, Coda said, taking a step into the room. Her bare feet made no sound on the metal floor. I mean, they could if they weren't all sleeping. Funny thing about your ship's atmospheric controls, they're really centralized. One person with basic engineering knowledge and access to a ventilation shaft can pump tranquilizer gas through half the vessel in about 15 minutes. Vextherin's hand finally closed around his weapon, drawing it in one smooth motion and leveling it at the girl's chest. Stop right there, human. One more step and I will vaporize you where you stand. Coda stopped, but only because she'd reached the observation window. She looked down at the tortured man below, her expression unreadable. "That's Captain Marcus Webb," she said quietly. "Good man, loyal, brave. Saved my life once during the Battle of Proxima Station. He pulled me out of a burning shuttle while we were under fire. Lost 2 fingers doing it, but he never complained. Not once." "Then you should have stayed hidden," Vex Thorin snarled. "Now you'll join him. Guards will be here any moment, gas or no gas. Our emergency protocols are—" "Impressive," Coda finished, finally turning to look at him. That smile was gone now. "Your emergency protocols involve sealing bulkheads, activating backup oxygen supplies for essential personnel, and deploying combat drones from the armory. Which would be scary, except I also disabled the bulkhead controls, rerouted the backup oxygen to waste disposal, and convinced your combat drones that they're all on mandatory maintenance cycle." Vex Thorin felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. It was an uncomfortable sensation, cold and sharp, settling somewhere in his upper thorax. If he'd been human, he might have called it fear. "Impossible," he whispered. "Our systems are military grade, encrypted, multi-layered security. No single prisoner could." "Oh, I'm not just any prisoner, Commander." Coda moved toward him now, slowly, like a predator that had already won and was just enjoying the hunt. "See, I'm from Earth. Specifically, I'm from the Rockies. Montana, to be exact." "Ever hear about Montana?" "I don't care about your primitive geographical divisions," Vex Thorin spat, but his weapon hand was shaking now. "You should," Coda replied, "because Montana winters hit -40 degrees Fahrenheit. That's where the Fahrenheit and Celsius scales meet, by the way. Same temperature, different numbers. Poetic, right? I grew up in that. Learned to hunt elk when I was 7. Killed my first grizzly bear at 13. Empty-handed, after it wandered into our camp. My dad was impressed. Mom said it was about time. She was closer now." Vex Thorin fired. The plasma bolt streaked through the air, superheated particles that should have reduced organic matter to ash. Coda twisted, her body moving with impossible speed, and the shot missed her by centimeters. She kept walking. "The thing about Earth," she continued, as if he hadn't just tried to kill her, "is that it's what you aliens call a death world. Class 12, I think. Dangerously high gravity, extreme temperature variations, atmospheric composition that would kill most species, tectonic activity that causes massive earthquakes, weather patterns that spawn hurricanes the size of small countries. Oh, and the wildlife. Let's not forget that basically everything on Earth evolved to either eat us, or poison us, or crush us." Vex Thorin fired again, and again. Each shot missed by smaller margins. On the third shot, he realized she wasn't just dodging. She was measuring, learning his timing. "So, here's the funny part," Coda said, now close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her green eyes. "You thought torturing Captain Webb would break him, would make him tell you our fleet positions, our supply lines, our defensive capabilities. But here's what you don't understand about humans, Commander. We don't have pain tolerances. We have pain relationships." "What are you talking about?" Vex Thorin backed up against the observation window, his weapon empty now, the charge pack depleted. "Pain is just information," Coda explained patiently. "It tells us something's wrong, but we evolved on a planet that was constantly trying to kill us, so we learned to ignore that information when necessary. We learned to push through it, to use it. Captain Webb down there, he's been conscious this whole time, aware, processing. And the reason he hasn't told you anything isn't because he's tough. It's because he's wondering how long until I came to get him." Coraval, who'd been frozen in shock this entire time, suddenly lunged for the emergency alarm panel on the wall. Coda's hand snapped out, grabbing the lieutenant's wrist without even looking, and there was a sharp crack. Coraval screamed, her scales flashing bright red in agony. "Sorry about that," Coda said, though she didn't sound sorry at all. Nothing personal. You seem nice, but I need you both to understand something very important right now. She released Coraval, who crumpled to the floor, cradling her broken wrist. Then Coda turned her full attention to Vex Thorin, and in that moment, he finally understood what true terror felt like. I grew up on a planet where the air pressure alone would crush most alien species, Coda said softly, where summer heat could cook you alive, and winter cold could freeze you solid in minutes, where the local fauna included creatures that could bite through steel and venom that could stop your heart in seconds. And not only did humans survive there, Commander, we thrived. We became the apex predators. We climbed to the top of the food chain by being meaner, tougher, and more stubborn than everything else that wanted to kill us. Vex Thorin tried to speak, but his vocal cords wouldn't cooperate. So, when you decided to torture Captain Webb, Coda continued, when you laughed at his pain, when you thought you were demonstrating your superiority, what you actually did was make a very, very serious mistake. You pissed off a Deathworlder. Actually, you pissed off several hundred Deathworlders because every human in the fleet heard about what you did. And now they sent me to deliver a message. She leaned in close enough that he could feel the heat radiating from her body. 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. His mind supplied uselessly. Normal human body temperature, except it felt like standing next to a star. The message is this, Coda whispered. Beg. I don't, Vex Thorin stammered. Beg, she repeated, her voice harder now. Beg for mercy. The way you made Captain Webb beg. The way you made 17,000 of my people's allies beg before you killed them. I want to hear it, Commander. I want to hear what it sounds like when someone who thinks they're superior realizes their prey. And Vex Thorin, commander of the Imperial Fleet, veteran of 100 battles, decorated war hero of the Caldreth Imperium, did something he'd never done in 342 cycles of life. He fell to his knees. Please, he whispered, please don't kill me. Coda looked down at him, and that terrible smile returned. Oh, Commander, she said, I'm not going to kill you. That would be mercy. And mercy is something you don't seem to understand. No, I'm going to do something much worse. I'm going to let you live, let you go back to your Imperium, let you tell them what happened here today, let you explain how one unarmed human girl from a death world walked through your maximum security cruiser like it was made of paper, disabled your entire crew, and made you kneel. She crouched down, bringing herself to eye level with him. And then, every night when you try to sleep, you're going to remember this moment. You're going to remember that somewhere out there, humans exist. Billions of us. From a planet that makes your worst nightmares look like pleasant dreams. And we're not just surviving anymore, Commander. We're expanding. We're learning. We're growing stronger. She stood up, turned toward the door. One more thing, she added, pausing at the threshold. I'm taking Captain Webb with me. And the 47 other humans you've got locked up in detention blocks C through F. We're going to walk right off this ship, take one of your shuttles, and fly away. And you're not going to stop us. Because if you try, Commander, if you even think about trying, I won't be so nice next time. Then she was gone, disappeared into the corridor like a ghost. Vex Thorin stayed on his knees for a long time after that, trembling. While beside him, Coraval whimpered in pain and confusion. Somewhere in the distance, alarms finally began to wail as the tranquilizer gas cleared and crew members started waking up. But Vex Thorin knew it was too late. She was already gone. They were all already gone. And the worst part, the part that would haunt him forever, was that she'd been right. He would remember every single night for the rest of his life. He'd laughed at human pain. And a Death World girl had taught him what real fear felt like. The shuttle bay was chaos incarnate when Coda arrived, dragging Captain Webb behind her. He was conscious now, barely. his legs struggling to remember how walking worked. After 6 hours of neural torture, behind them came the other prisoners, 47 humans in various states of injury and exhaustion, stumbling through corridors that should have been swarming with security forces but were instead filled with unconscious Caldrith bodies. "How did you?" Webb croaked, his voice raw from screaming. "How did you do all this?" "Later, Captain," Coda replied, her eyes scanning the bay for threats. "Right now, we need to move. My little chemistry experiment with their ventilation system won't last forever. Maybe another 10 minutes before their higher-ups start waking up with very bad headaches and worse attitudes." The shuttle bay was massive, designed to house dozens of assault craft and transport vessels. Coda had studied the schematics during her 3 days of captivity, memorizing every exit, every control panel, every structural weakness. The Caldreth were arrogant, she'd learned. They relied too heavily on technology, on systems and protocols. They never considered that a prisoner might actually study their captors instead of cowering in fear. Big mistake. "That one," she said, pointing to a mid-sized transport near the bay doors. "Thorium-class shuttle. Seats 50, equipped with basic weapons, faster than light capable. We take that, we can make it to the Terran defense perimeter before they scramble interceptors." Lieutenant Marcus Hayes, a wiry man with burn scars covering half his face, limped up beside her. "Coda, even if we get aboard, there's no way they'll let us leave. The bay doors are controlled from the bridge. We'll be trapped like fish in a barrel." Coda's smile returned, that dangerous expression that made even fellow humans nervous. "Who said anything about asking permission?" She pulled a small device from her pocket, no bigger than a coin. It looked like a piece of random metal, the kind of scrap you'd find in any machine shop. But when she pressed her thumb against it, the device began to pulse with a soft blue light. "What is that?" Webb asked, his military training overriding his pain-fogged mind. "You know how the Caldreth love their centralized control systems," Coda replied, walking toward the shuttle. "Everything runs through the main computer core. Life support, weapons, navigation, communications. It's efficient. I'll give them that. But efficiency creates vulnerability. One exploit in the right place, and the whole system becomes your playground." "You hacked their mainframe," Hayes breathed, understanding dawning. "But how? They kept you in a detention cell. No computer access, no tools, nothing." "Funny story about that," Coda said, helping Webb up the shuttle ramp. The others followed, moving as quickly as their injuries allowed. "Turns out Caldreth detention cells have environmental controls. Temperature, humidity, air pressure, all adjustable, all connected to the main network, and all accessible through a very simple interface panel that they assumed was too complex for a primitive human to understand." She entered the shuttle's cockpit, sliding into the pilot's seat with practiced ease. Her fingers flew across the control panel, and the engines hummed to life. "I spent 2 days mapping their entire network architecture," she continued, strapping herself in. "Finding back doors, creating access points, building my little surprise package. Then I spent 6 hours assembling this beauty from spare parts I pulled out of the cell's air filtration system." Webb collapsed into the co-pilot seat, shaking his head in disbelief. "You're insane. You know that, right?" "I prefer creative," Coda replied. "Everyone buckled? Good, because this next part is going to be bumpy." She activated the device. Throughout the Dominance, every computer system simultaneously received the same instruction, a cascading command that bypassed security protocols and executed with absolute authority. Bay doors opened. Weapon systems powered down. Shield generators cycled into maintenance mode. Navigation locks disengaged. And in the detention observation deck, every screen suddenly displayed the same message in bright yellow text. "Have a nice day. Love, the primitive human." Vex Thuran, who'd finally managed to stand up and was attempting to contact the bridge, stared at the message in horror. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no, no." The shuttle shot out of the bay like a missile. Koda's piloting skills immediately apparent as she threaded the craft through the narrow opening at speeds that would have terrified most pilots. Behind them, the Dominance finally began to wake up, its crew stumbling to their stations, trying to understand what had just happened. "Commander," the voice crackled through Vex Thorin's communicator. "The human prisoners have escaped. They've taken a shuttle and are approaching the perimeter. Should we fire?" Vex Thorin's mind raced. If he gave the order, they'd destroy the shuttle. Problem solved. But then he remembered those green eyes, that terrible smile, the casual way she'd broken Coraval's wrist without even looking. "She said she'd be nice this time." Coraval whimpered from the floor, still cradling her injured wrist. "What happens if we're not nice back?" Vex Thorin made a decision that would haunt his military career forever. "Let them go," he said quietly. "Sir?" The communication officer sounded confused. "Sir, we have weapons lock. We can destroy them easily." "I said let them go," Vex Thorin roared. "Stand down. All ships, stand down." Silence on the comm. Then, hesitantly, "Understood, Commander." Inside the shuttle, Koda watched the Caldreth fleet on her sensors. 3 destroyers, 2 cruisers, and the Dominance itself. All within firing range. All with weapons charged and targeting systems locked. And none of them firing. "They're letting us go," Hayes said, disbelief coloring his voice. "I don't understand. They could vaporize us right now. Why aren't they?" Koda thought about Vex Thorin on his knees, trembling, begging. She thought about the fear in his eyes, the way his mandibles had clicked together in terror instead of laughter. She thought about the message she delivered and how sometimes the most powerful weapon wasn't a gun or a bomb, but an idea. The idea that humans were different, that pain didn't break them the same way it broke other species, that their death world had forged them into something other species couldn't quite comprehend. "Because," Koda said softly, "I taught him a lesson, and some lessons stick better than others." The shuttle crossed into Terran space 40 minutes later, where a patrol group of Earth Defense Fleet vessels immediately surrounded them. Captain Webb, partially recovered now, transmitted identification codes and a brief explanation of their escape. The fleet commander, a grizzled woman named Admiral Rachel Torres, responded with stunned silence, followed by incredulous laughter. "You did what?" Torres demanded over the comm. "Mills, you're telling me you single-handedly infiltrated a Caldreth Imperial cruiser, disabled their entire crew, rescued 48 prisoners, stole a shuttle, and they just let you leave?" "When you say it like that, it sounds crazy," Koda replied, grinning. "But yeah, pretty much. Though to be fair, I had help. Captain Webb and the others were very cooperative." "I was unconscious for most of it," Webb interjected. "She dragged me like a sack of potatoes." Torres's face appeared on the view screen, her expression somewhere between admiration and horror. "Mills, when you get back to base, you're either getting a medal or a psych evaluation. Maybe both. Possibly at the same time." "I'll take the medal," Koda said. "The psych evaluation sounds boring." 3 weeks later, Koda stood in the Grand Hall of the Terran Alliance headquarters on Mars, wearing a dress uniform that felt wrong. After months in combat zones and prison cells, the ceremony was tedious, full of speeches and formal protocols that made her skin itch. Dignitaries from a dozen allied species attended, all curious to see the human who'd humbled the Caldreth Imperium. Admiral Torres pinned the Star of Valor to her chest, humanity's highest military honor, while cameras recorded every moment for posterity. "For extraordinary courage in the face of overwhelming odds," Torres announced, her voice carrying through the hall. "For tactical brilliance and unwavering dedication to her fellow soldiers, for demonstrating the finest qualities of the human spirit, we honor Private First Class Dakota Mills." Applause filled the chamber. Koda stood at attention, trying not to fidget, thinking about how she'd rather be anywhere else. Mountains maybe, or a bar. Definitely a bar. After the ceremony, Webb found her on a balcony overlooking the Martian landscape, red dunes stretching to the horizon under a pink sky. "Not a fan of ceremonies?" he asked, joining her at the railing. "Not really my thing," Coda admitted. "Too much standing, not enough punching." Webb laughed, the sound rusty but genuine. "I never properly thanked you for what you did. I was ready to die in that chair, Coda, ready to take whatever they threw at me rather than betray our people. And then you showed up like some kind of avenging angel and turned the whole situation upside down." "You would have done the same for me," Coda replied simply. "That's what we do. We don't leave people behind." "Still," Webb insisted, "what you did, it wasn't just brave. It was brilliant. How did you even know their systems would be vulnerable like that?" Coda shrugged. "I didn't. Not for sure. But I know people, and I know fear. The Kaldreth built their empire on being the biggest, baddest predators in the galaxy. They're so used to everyone being terrified of them that they forgot to be afraid themselves. They forgot that somewhere out there might be something scarier. And you showed them what that something looks like," Webb said quietly. "I showed them what a pissed-off human looks like," Coda corrected. "Big difference. We're not naturally scarier than them, Captain. We're not stronger or faster or smarter, but we're more stubborn, more adaptable, and we absolutely refuse to quit, even when quitting makes sense." A message chime interrupted their conversation. Webb checked his datapad, his eyebrows rising. "Well," he said slowly, "this is interesting. The Kaldreth Imperium just requested a diplomatic meeting. They want to discuss peace terms." Coda turned to look at him. "Seriously? Seriously? Apparently news of your little adventure spread through their fleet faster than a virus. Morale is down, desertion rates are up, and several ship commanders are questioning whether fighting humans is worth the cost. Commander Vexthorin has been recalled to the homeworld for debriefing. Rumor has it he's not handling it." "Well, good," Coda said without sympathy. "Maybe next time he'll think twice before torturing prisoners." "The Alliance leadership wants you involved in the negotiations," Webb continued. "They think having you there sends a message." "What kind of message?" Webb smiled. "The kind that says we're willing to talk, but we're not willing to be pushed around. The kind that reminds them what happened last time they underestimated us." Coda considered this. Politics and diplomacy weren't her forte. She was a soldier, more comfortable with weapons than words. But she thought about the other prisoners, the ones who hadn't been as lucky as Captain Webb, the ones who died in Kaldreth detention cells, far from home, subjected to torture and cruelty because their captors saw them as lesser beings. "Okay," she said finally, "I'll do it, but I'm not wearing this stupid dress uniform." The peace negotiations took place 3 months later on a neutral station orbiting a dead star, halfway between Terran and Kaldreth space. The conference room was designed for multiple species, with adjustable gravity and atmospheric controls, and it was very carefully neutral in decoration. Coda sat across from a delegation of Kaldreth officials, 5 of them, all wearing elaborate ceremonial armor that probably cost more than her entire year's salary. They regarded her with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed fear. Commander Vexthorin was not among them. According to intelligence reports, he'd been assigned to a remote outpost on the edge of Kaldreth space, as far from the front lines as possible, disgraced but alive. "So," the lead negotiator, a female named Rilthar, began carefully, "we understand you're the one responsible for the incident aboard the Dominance." "Incident," Coda repeated, tasting the word. "That's one way to describe it. I prefer successful rescue operation, but sure, incident works too." Rilthar's scales shifted colors nervously. "Yes, well, that particular event has caused significant discussion within our government. We've come to realize that perhaps our approach to this conflict has been misguided." "You mean the part where you tortured prisoners and laughed about it?" Coda asked bluntly. "Yeah, I'd say that was pretty misguided." The other Kaldreth shifted uncomfortably. Humans had a reputation now, throughout the galaxy. Deathworlders. Crazy. Unpredictable. Dangerous when cornered. The kind of species you didn't mess with unless you were prepared for serious consequences. We wish to propose a ceasefire, Rilthar continued. A formal end to hostilities between our peoples. Territory disputes can be resolved through arbitration. Trade agreements established. Perhaps even an alliance given time. Admiral Torres, sitting beside Coda, leaned forward. And what guarantees do we have that you won't simply use this ceasefire to rebuild your forces and attack us again later? We're willing to accept monitoring stations. Another Caldreth official offered. Terran observers embedded within our fleet. Full transparency regarding military deployments. Whatever is necessary to demonstrate our sincerity. Coda listened to them talk, watched them negotiate, saw the genuine fear underlying their diplomatic language. They weren't offering peace because they wanted to. They were offering it because they had to, because somewhere in the back of their minds, every single Caldreth leader was now thinking the same thing. If one human could do what Dakota Mills did, what could a million humans do? What could a billion? I have one condition, Coda said suddenly, interrupting a discussion about demilitarized zones. Everyone turned to look at her. Every prisoner you're holding, she continued, every single human or human ally currently in Caldreth custody, you release them today, right now. No delays, no negotiations, no excuses. That happens, and we'll talk about peace. That doesn't happen, and you can all go home and start building bunkers, because I promise you, I've got friends who make me look downright reasonable. Rilthar hesitated. That's over 3,000 individuals across multiple detention facilities. I can count, Coda replied coldly. Your answer. The Caldreth delegates conferred among themselves in their clicking, chittering language. Finally, Rilthar turned back to the humans. Agreed, she said. We'll begin immediate release protocols. Within 48 hours, all prisoners will be transferred to Terran custody. 24 hours, Coda countered, and I'm coming with the pickup teams. I want to personally verify that every single person is accounted for and unharmed. Any discrepancies, any injuries that look suspicious. And this whole peace thing is off the table. More nervous scale shifting. More rapid conversation. Then, 24 hours acceptable. Torres smiled, the expression sharp and satisfied. Then I believe we have the foundation for an agreement. The negotiations continued for 6 more hours, hammering out details and protocols, establishing frameworks for lasting peace. When it was finally over, Coda stepped out onto the station's observation deck, staring at the dead star burning cold and silent in the void. Webb joined her there, as he often did these days. Think it'll last? He asked. The peace? Maybe, Coda said. Maybe not. But it'll last longer than it would have if we just kept fighting. They're scared now, really scared. And scared people can either lash out or back down. We gave them a reason to back down. By terrifying them, Webb pointed out. Sometimes fear is the only language bullies understand, Coda replied. The Caldreth spent centuries conquering weaker species, enslaving them, torturing them. Nobody ever stood up to them effectively. Nobody ever made them question whether they were actually the apex predators they thought they were, until humans came along. She turned to face him, and her expression was serious now. I didn't do what I did for glory, Captain. I didn't do it to become some kind of hero or legend. I did it because you were hurting, and I could help, because those 47 other people deserved better. Because someone needed to show the Caldreth that humans don't roll over and die when things get hard. And you certainly showed them that, Webb agreed. The whole galaxy knows now. Earth, the Deathworld, humans, the species too stubborn to know when they're beaten. Private First Class Dakota Mills, the girl who made an Imperial commander beg. Coda grimaced. I hate that they're making such a big deal about it. I just want to go home, back to Montana, back to normal life. I don't think normal is an option anymore, Webb said gently. You're famous now, Coda. People are going to want to hear your story, learn from it. You're a symbol. I'm a soldier, Coda corrected. Nothing more, nothing less. But she knew he was right. The galaxy had changed. Humanity's place in it had changed. And she'd been the catalyst for that change, whether she wanted to be or not. Somewhere far away, on a distant outpost, Commander Vextherin stared at his own alien stars and remembered green eyes and a terrible smile. He remembered the feeling of his knees hitting the deck, the sound of his own voice begging for mercy. He remembered learning that pain wasn't humanity's weakness. It was their teacher, their forge, the crucible that made them strong. And he understood, finally, why the galaxy should be very, very careful about picking fights with Deathworlders. Because humans didn't just survive pain. They befriended it, made it part of themselves, used it to become something more dangerous than any weapon or warship. They became survivors, adapters, warriors forged in a hell of their own world's making. And nothing in the universe was quite prepared for that. Back on the station, Coda Mills smiled one last time, that dangerous expression that had become her trademark, and thought about going home. The war was over, peace was beginning, and somewhere out there, in the vast darkness of space, every species that had ever underestimated humanity was learning a very important lesson. Never laugh at a human's pain, because that human might just be from Montana. And Montana winters don't raise victims, they raise survivors.